this is where the technology is really empowering. We work with various consultants and clients. I can see people within those businesses who are really embracing this. Until now, they've lacked the technical skills to actually execute on that vision. You can see those people being vastly more productive as a result.
You're listening to Inside Commerce, a weekly e-commerce strategy, technology and CX focused podcast hosted by experienced digital consultants and re-platform specialists James Gedd and Paul Rogers. Get insights into e-commerce strategy, leading brands, hear from industry thought leaders and leading tech vendors with practical advice to help you improve your online CX. This episode is sponsored by WorldPay. Got another exciting debate, discussion, rant going on today. So we're talking about, I'm actually stealing this terminology from our guest I'll introduce in a minute, bringing the build versus buy debate back into the light. I think it's a really nice way of framing it. So we're looking at practical ways to use AI to clean and optimize data to help with data management, data migrations without having to spend insane amounts of money on licenses and ongoing commitments to tooling. And the reason for talking about this and using practical use cases and talking about what we're seeing and what we're doing is there's a lot of talk about what AI is for and how it's revolutionizing the world and how amazing it is. But there's less kind of in-depth discussion about, okay, so what am I using it for and how am I going about it and what are the pros and the cons? And that's what I want to do today with our guest, Chris, who is the co-founder of OnState. So welcome back to the pod, Chris.
Thanks, James. Nice to be back. Thanks for inviting us back. This is something that we've been very much engaged with over the past couple of years, really. So I know we met the other week, and you were mired in the middle of a migration at the time. So this was very much kind of top of your mind, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And what I like is that you've got additional skills I have because you are running an agency that is building and delivering, whereas I work within projects advising and guiding. So I do less active work in the AI than you do, although I am using it to fulfill some use cases in projects. So I thought this would be a really interesting one for our listeners about how you blend the use of tools with, I think you framed it in DIY approaches, which I think is quite a nice way of talking about this. But before we get into it, because there'll be people who listen to you on the podcast previously, people who know you and people who don't. So do you want to give people a bit of a taste for who you are and what OnState is?
Yeah, so I'm co-founder of OnState. We are a Shopify premier partner based up or down, depending on where you are, whether they're in Leeds. There's 18 of us. We delivered, we've been a Shopify partner for 5 or 6 years now. Prior to that, we were Magento Salesforce partner. My background was in multi-channel retail. I was ecom manager at ecom for a high street fashion retailer before setting up OnState. And we've been, as a business, we've been very interested in AI, ever since the advent of Chat 3.5, I think, and very much came at it from a point of view that, from an existential crisis, really. All of a sudden, we're presented with a technology which knows things and can write code, which are two things that agencies do a lot of. So we've sort of been down the rabbit hole and back out really on it. And, the past year, I say we've fairly successfully integrated it into, lots of the work that we do as a business.
Yeah, and I think, so one of the areas we're going to probe into more is around kind of data management, product data management specifically. And this came out of a few chats we've had about how AI can be used to help with data transformations for product data when you've got product data in a source. And I've been working on a project recently, Magento to Shopify, and the legacy data has always got mess in it. It's people create hacks to get data into, and a developer finds a way of getting that onto the front end, but the data might not be structured in the right way, might not be set up in the way you ideally want it in a clean new system, especially in the light of AI product discovery and better structured data. And then you realize that trying to get it from A to B without paying somebody loads and loads of money to do manual transformations is actually really quite challenging. And this is where the AI comes in. So I think framing it, and then I want to get into like some use cases you worked on, but the framing for me is that there are three main approaches that you now get. Taking out the equation, paying a data specialist to manually grind through this in Excel using formulas and stuff, but it is, you invest in a specialist and product management tool, PIM. And there are more modern AI focused ones like Emphas, for example, but there's also existing PIMs in the market like Pimbly that have rolled in AI capabilities on top of the core platform. You outsource to a tech partner to do the entire thing, who will use AI tooling in order to write and or create custom apps to do this. Or you do the DIY approach, which is use your own toolkit, and that might do 80% of the work, and then you need to do the other 20% another way. So there's this mix of approaches. And to frame this, I guess it would be useful for you to talk people through, coming from a systems integrator agency, developer's point of view, what is the evolution in the use of AI as you've seen it? Like, how has it changed, and what impact are you now seeing it have on project delivery?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a lot to unpack there. So we, like a good chunk of the projects we work on are migrations. So this invariably comes up, and obviously over the last 5 years, we've seen, a decent shift towards Shopify. So there's been a lot of focus on taking data from legacy systems and converting them into Shopify. The way we've always approached that as a business, lots of people who work on Shopify, you're thinking with Matrixify, formerly Excelify, which is, I think Shopify actually recommend it now as the way to import and export data into the platform. So we're generally taking, or have been taking, data like product export, WordPress exports, whatever, from the old system, and convert them into Matrixify, and then ingest them that way. And Matrixify is, a very mature product, very capable. It's got some nice little workflow tools in there, like having a dry run before you actually import the data. And we found that, so that's been the process. And the way we've integrated AI into that is, so for example, if I think back a year, 18 months to a project that we did where we migrated from another platform, we'd get the data into Google Sheets. As a CSV, you get a product export. And then in terms of translating that, we're trying to get that into Matrixify format. So previously, it had been spreadsheet wrangling. We might have written some scripts. As of the advent of ChatGPT 3.5 and onwards, you can now you can get AI systems to help you transform that data. There's a really good, anyone who knows Excel, you'll know about macros, which are basically small programs you could run within Excel. We use Google Sheets, and Google Sheets equivalent is called AppScript, which is basically JavaScript that allows you to add new functionality. And it is, if you use Google Sheets a lot and you don't know about AppScript and you need to do complex things in it, then it's well worth looking at, because it is a superpower, and it can really extend what the platform, what Google Sheets does. So I'll give you an example. Google Sheets, like Excel's, got lots of built-in functions like sum and average and things like that. Using AppScript, you can create your own functions. So let's say in one cell, you've got a bunch of data. Let's say it's a load of tags, from product tags from the legacy platform you're importing from, and you need to extract the value, or all those values. You can fire up GPT, Claude, or even Gemini. I think Gemini's built in now, and give it the source data and say, write me an app script that will allow me to take that data and turn it into the structured format. And that might be taking all those tags, for example, separating them out, putting them into separate columns as meta fields. And it can do that. And you don't need to know JavaScript, because the LLM will write that for you, and it'll even tell you how to install it if you're not that comfortable as well. So straight away, we were using that to sort of augment the velocity at which we could, which we could manipulate data within specifically Google Sheets.
Ready to grow your business online? With WorldPay e-commerce, you can deliver fast, secure payments your customers love, backed by global reach and real people-powered support. Scale with confidence and enhance your customers' experience with WorldPay e-commerce.
Yeah, I've been doing this a lot recently. The use case I had a client who has old blog content in WordPress and Magento and needing to get into Shopify's blog, but you've got a dump of really unclean HTML. And actually, ChatGPT, I got the subscribe, the professional license rather than just the free one, because you get more computational power and you can do deeper scripting in it. And I'm not a developer. I can't write Python scripts. I can't create this stuff myself. It just wouldn't work. And I play around for ages. I used Gemini in Sheets, and I found that Gemini doesn't go nearly as far as GPT does in terms of its ability to execute more complex Python. So I got to the point where I was getting it to do things like replace CDN strings to get the correct new one for Shopify. removing specific HTML classes, formatting things, deleting certain parts. There's probably about 20 different commands that I needed. And I found that the iterative process in ChatGPT far quicker, more accurate. And it's amazing, actually, that would have 588 blogs, re-cleaning, reformatting. If you import all that data and then have to redo it, I mean, Christ, you've imported loads of crap HTML in the first place, which is just bloating the site. But it takes ages manually to go through that. By doing that alone, I estimate maybe 70 to 75% of the issues were stripped out by about half a day's work in total over all the iterations, which then sped up the ability of the content team to then go through and just sense check the formatting. And then the last step is somebody, once all of the content and collections and products are in Shopify, doing a internal link analysis and finding the broken links so we can update those and then re-import those. That was... For me, I know that I would have been less efficient than other people because it was the first time I did that, but it was an eye-opener to actually how quickly you can learn on the go with it.
Yeah, it is. You raised a good point there about internal linking as well, because we've done that with importing WordPress content, because embedded within that are these valuable internal links, like within the body copy. Now, if your LLM that you're using to clean the HTML also knows the new URLs of all those posts, you can potentially update that at the same time as well. The temptation is, right, to just, in the ideal world, you would take all your product data and you would dump it in the LLM and it would sort it all out. And it can do that to a degree, but the limiting factor is the LLM's context window and the amount of data that it can handle in its own memory at any one time. But the way that the modern tools deal with this is they don't actually deal with all of that. What they will do is they will write their own Python scripts in the background. And if you look at the chain of thought and the reasoning, the sort of the output, you can see them doing this. They'll be writing Python scripts. They'll be importing it. They'll be analyzing the data and then making recommendations and writing scripts to manipulate it off the back of that. And that avoids this situation where they need to cram all this data. And if you're moving thousands of products, you're going to comfortably exceed any context window. Even Gemini, which is has 1 million tokens, it's probably the largest of the kind of the main models at the moment. It's still far too big for that.
Yeah, the other thing that I found it really useful is I know you can use advanced formulas and functions in Google Sheets or Excel to normalize, restructure, like take a product title, lowercase it, remove spaces, put in hyphens. You can do that through structured formulas, but it takes time. If you don't know all the formulas available, it takes time to research and learn them, learn how to concatenate different formulas into a master one to make it work. So much quicker if you're not an advanced user to go into an AI model and just go, right, I need you to do step 1, do this, step 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you're right, you can see it thinking and you can see it formulating the Python responses. Then it'll say, this is what I think you want and this is what I'm going to do. Is that correct? And then you can, what I found really helpful is you give it examples and go, right, in row 4, column D4 the output should now be X because the input was, and you give it 3 or 4 tangible examples of what the correct responses should be so that it can learn on the go, which really helps when you get into, I guess, some bit more complexity about when you're trying to get it to match things like name value pairs, like color, and for it to know silver is a color, blue, all those different ones. So yeah, I find it quite powerful that way.
Yeah, it's when going through this process, it does force you to engage with the underlying content structure on your site and trying to think about the primitives, the underlying kind of concepts that drive your business from a content and product perspective. So we're working with a wellness client at the moment, and we're engaging with that. So we're thinking about things like ingredients and condition and products and brands and how they all interrelate. Because if we crack that, if we get that, then get that right, we can build really interesting educational discovery experiences on top of that. So I've described just now the process we went through a year, 18 months ago, and then recently I took that same product export, which was just a list of product information with tags, and there was some categorization implied in there. And I gave it to, I think, Claude. I mean, it needs to be said, I think, that the last iterations of particularly Claude, like Opus 4.5 and 4.6, I was getting a bit it seemed like that, the gains with every new version were marginal, but I think, and I have seen other people saying this, that it does seem like these last versions have represented quite a big step on. I just wanted to see with what I could do. So bought, 1 hour's worth of, bought a bunch of Claude Code credits, got that CSV, gave myself an hour and see how far I could get. So I gave her the CSV, it analyzed it. And then, you can what they call, you can zero shot this, right? And you can say, right, write me an import tools, take this information and put it into Shopify. And it will do a decent enough fist of it. Like, or if you know what you're asking for, and this is like, I think for an operator like you, James, like, you say you've got no technical background, but you're technical enough and you know what to ask for, basically, and how things like product data work. I think this is where the technology is really empowering for people who know that. And we work with various different consultants and clients, and I can see these people within those businesses who are really embracing this, where they know what they want, but hitherto, up until now, they've lacked the technical skills to actually execute on that vision. And you can see those people doing that now and being vastly more productive as a result. But anyway, so rather than just giving it a very basic prompt, it took some time to say, right, okay, well, I want you to go through this data. I want you to infer the category structure. I want you to figure out all the core fields and how they map from the old system into Shopify. I don't have to explain to it like what Shopify's core fields are. It's already in there. Yeah, it knows this. It knows there's a price, SKU, description, etc. I want you to convert all the tags into meta fields. I want you to find opportunities to turn meta fields into meta objects where we might want to extend that data, for like icons or whatever on the PDP. Also go through all the collections and figure out what those smart collections rule needs to be. So a smart collection in Shopify is, rather than assigning a product and saying, right, that goes in blue flowers, you're going to write a rule. There's going to be a rule that says, right, color equals blue and type equals flower. And I was, within an hour, this was by no means a finished product, but within an hour, it made like very impressive headway into analyzing that data set, presenting it back to me in a way that, I could very quickly evaluate, sense check, and I did some spot checks, and, it all checked out. I had pretty high confidence in the quality of the output. And I'd set off trying to make a tool, like a one-size-fits-all tool for managing migrations. But then in going through the process or rethought this, it's like, well, I don't need to build a reusable tool, right? If I can build this thing in a matter of hours, then I don't need to think about longevity, right? We can whip up a tool for a one-off job like this and get it to do the job and tear it down, when the next opportunity comes around next week, and it might be from the same platform, but we'll write something again that is specific to that. There'll be nuances and differences in that for that client that we might approach differently. And this is the thing, the AI part sort of ate my tool, and the AI ended up doing the work and built me a nice sort of UI to layer on top of it. It's a difficult concept to describe, but it's something that, as with everything AI, I just encourage people just to engage with it and just see how far you get. If you're worried about spending too much money on it, get something like Google Anti-Gravity, which is a sort of coding environment, but you'd have to write a line of code. You can just prompt and you can ask it to build something, and it can, and you can see how far you get on. I think I would recommend that to anybody.
Yeah, it brings me back to a point that I raised when Paul and I were doing our like future gazing at the end of last year for about where things were headed this year. And one of the key things I flagged is about tactical middleware, tactical solutions, because I think we've evolved from where it's one size fits all to a more flexible tech stack, but you buy in a capability or you build something that's going to stand the test of time. And that's your investment. That's your R&D investment. It's CapEx. It's great. Okay, we've invested. Versus, you're right, conceptually for people to write off stuff for a one-off project and go, what, I'm not reusing that. I've spent a couple of grand and I'm just going to throw it away. There's a real education piece now about understanding that tactical can sometimes be the right way of doing it, because actually the other way of doing it would be to spend a load more money and get the same outcome potentially, but get there far slower.
Yeah. And you buy something in which you then have to learn. and then you have to bend to shape your specific need versus something that you could design to your precise needs. Now, I don't want to oversimplify this, right? It does, the thing about AI, and anyone who's engaged with it will know this, that to get to that point I got to the other day, the first 80% is like magic. Getting the final 20% and getting it to actually work, there's a lot of back and forth and quite menial work where you're basically pleading with the machine to try and get it to do what you want. And there's a distinction to be made here, right? Between, people talk about it's the death of SaaS, and the idea is that this is going to become the norm. Whereas rather than buying in a product, I'm just going to describe my own and I'm going to build it specifically for me. And I think there's a distinction to be made between like these one-off use cases where I think it is valid, right? If you're confident enough, versus, somebody I saw on LinkedIn the other day, I've vibe coded a version of Shopify. Well, good luck with that, because, you might have a shopping cart and it might have an admin on, but there's all that other stuff. There's the whole ecosystem. If you built an API onto it, how are you going to extend it? And, think back to my former role as an e-commerce manager, head of e-commerce, I could build these tools, right? But I don't want to build something that the business then relies on, because I've already got a full-time job doing what I do. I don't want then to become a product manager and also the head of engineering as well, and be responsible for this software which is now running the business. I think we should be careful to distinguish the two.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really, really sage advice. But for me, it comes to time to value. When I work on these projects, I look at things and we all know, right? Whether it's you're doing a one-off piece of, do you know what, we're updating, we're fixing our product data because it's not good enough, but we're not moving platform, or you're moving platform and therefore product data migration is part of it. This work can become tedious and it can become stressful because it's not foolproof, right? You come up against barriers where you suddenly go, shit, those attributes are wrong. The mapping in the current system is wrong, and therefore it's given us all the values are wrong, or that it's not set up correctly. There's all these continuous things, or there's missing values. And for me, it's like, it's not I want this approach of AI to be perfect, so I don't have to do as. I want to speed up how quickly I can get to the value part, which is right now it's in a decent enough place where someone can take it in a matrix sheet and polish it, or they can use bulk editing in a Shopify. Or actually the core data now is robust enough to put into the PIM that you've already got, so that you can then use the PIM data cleansing capabilities to polish it how you want. That's where I'm coming from. It's let me speed up so that I don't have to spend $5,000 and another expert over here to get the foundational work done.
Yeah, precisely. And again, if it is part of your role as well, it does afford you the ability to, as I say, engage with the data and it's an opportunity to rethink how you approach things like content as well, especially in light of LLM based discovery and getting that, the one, no one really knows what's happening there. Yeah. But there's a lot of people spending a lot of time thinking about it. And, and it in large part, the main recommendation at the moment is to sort out your data. And it's a good opportunity. It's a good way into it to actually engage with this. And it does force you to think in these sort of foundational terms about the data that runs and the content that is important to your business.
Let's give people some practical advice on this as well, because if you don't know what you're doing, or if you come to the point you made earlier about you need to understand what good outputs are like, because if you can't define what a successful output is, you're going to be putting invalid or inaccurate prompts in, and you're going to get something that you can't interrogate. So how can people use these tools intelligently so they don't end up, faffing away hours of their time and get nothing out of it?
I think, you will faff away like a significant amount of your time to begin with, as you explore it. You made a good point earlier on about being very specific about inputs and outputs. So like if you're going to ask a system to do a transformation, say between one product and that same product for a different system, then give it examples of both. So take the time to find your most complicated product, in your current export, and then invest a bit of time in figuring out what that looks like in the new one and give it those two pieces to work from so we can understand the transformations. That said, like the ability of the systems to work almost more autonomously on that is getting better and better. People talk about prompt engineering as a skill and the ability to ask exactly the right question. That's definitely the case, right? Like my example earlier on where, I brought my experience with Shopify to ask the system to create exactly what I knew I wanted versus what it came up with when left to its own devices. The version that, thankfully for my own career, it was still better than what it came up with on its own. But the gap is narrowing, and you might want to say, well, okay, well, have a go at transforming it yourself to begin with, and it might, it might make a decent fist of that, and it just gives you a way into it again to start engaging with the data. But I think that's a good way to do it. Like if you can specify the inputs and the outputs. As I said, the one that I built the other day, whizzed up in an hour. The system was doing all the work behind the scenes. What I essentially built was a UI to layer on top of that allowed me to interrogate what it was coming out with. And one thing these systems are great at is like building dashboards, like that. And you'll see anybody who spent any time sort of live coding has produced something with a beautiful dashboard. And you could certainly ask it to do that so that you can see the data that it's out, or if you can validate it yourself. And if there's anything that is changing, you go back into the model and you ask it to make those changes and represent the data.
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest learning I've had going through this entire process is accepting that it's not going to be perfect. And because in the same way that it's hard to write code so absolutely perfectly, nothing ever goes wrong with it and is absolutely perfect on every level. But the same with these, it's to know that you're not going to get it 100%, not even after several iterations. There's still a few things where it's not quite getting the accuracy of the transformations that I wanted in the product data. But it also, the big caveat for me is being able to spot where it's clearly getting something wrong when it's told you it's done something, and pointing out and pinpointing. Because I've had this where the blog one where it said, yes, I've done this. I've replaced all of these I've replaced X with Y, and I go and look and Y is not being replaced, and there's still loads of situations where X is in the cells, and it's been able to go in and go, but that hasn't worked. You haven't done it. And initially it's frustrating because it's like having a conversation with someone and he says, yes, I've done it. And then you're looking, but you haven't done it. And they go, yeah, I have done it. So you have to be able to unwind that and not get really wound up and start smashing your computer around, and have the patience to try and educate it, but also accept that you will probably at some point exhaust the ability of those models to do exactly what you want.
Yeah. And like things like hallucination are a problem, an unsolved problem. So, I mean, I was interested yesterday just to see, I took a design, like a desktop and a mobile screen grab of home pages of one of our recent builds, and threw that into the latest version of Claude, the best, probably best model out there at the moment. Said, right, recreate that pixel perfect. And, it did an all right job. It was, it's nothing that you actually, it was fine. It was a decent enough layout, but it was missing all the design niceties and everything that our developers have built in. But also it chucked in a completely new promotional banner right in the middle of the page. Something really weird, like a discount for Shopify Plus users or something, which was not implied anywhere in any of the designs, right? So when it's producing something visual like that, or a piece of written work, like in your example, it's really easy to spot these things going wrong, because it's just self-evident. It's right there in the middle of the eyes that it built. If you're a non-coder and it's producing code, you have no idea.
Yeah.
We validate the output. I think the approach I was taking the other day when putting that tool together is, I'm not asking the LLM necessary to do all the transformations itself. I'm asking it to build a tool to handle those transformations. There's no scope for it to hallucinate values, right? All it's doing is taking one format and outputting the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think this is for me so the project I'm working on, where I was doing some of this foundational work, the client has engaged with the team at Emphas, and Emphas have a tool that has lots of different AI capabilities with it around data enrichment, data cleansing, where you can create the AI logic in order to do mappings between two different data sets where attribute values exist, don't exist, or the attribute names are totally different, and the values could be mixed up across multiple columns, and you need to get into a standardized one. But actually doing the precursor work in the AI to clean up and have better data, then puts the data in a cleaner state so that the rules within that engine are more efficient, and therefore you go through fewer iterations. And yet you still have to go through iterations, but actually that then means that you're focusing your license fee on getting more valuable outputs rather than spending loads and loads of money on credit just to get what was crap data in the first place into a decent usable state.
Yeah. And there is, like I say, that there is a cost aspect to all of this. Like there's a monetary cost, and there's an ecological cost as well. There's an energy, water cost as well, which, I think as an industry we need to be mindful of. If you're interested in engagement, going back to your sort of question around how do you validate things, I think one important concept that people don't often understand is that an AI-driven application, there's making use of an LLM. All it's doing in the background, right, is generating prompts in the same way that you do when you sit down and you use ChatGPT or Claude or whatever. It's just doing that at scale, and it's doing it programmatically. If you want to understand, Google have a product called AI Studio, which allows you to, and there's a decent free tier. It's not as good as the free tier as it used to be. They've recently reduced that, and prior to that, this was a very, very valuable tool for doing large data manipulation. But if you want to understand how it works, then you can use that. It's sort of reasonably like a chat interface. But I'll give you an example. We used it last week. So we've got a client, we're doing a Shopify upgrade at the moment, and we're looking to help them get the most out of the content they've already got. They've got a vast archive of content, images, blog posts, everything. So thinking, right, can we add metadata to the blog posts, to the images? So fired up AI Studio, pick a model, and we can pick a cheap one. But Gemini's got several different models. It's got Pro at the top, Flash, and then Flash Lite, which is the fastest and most basic. But even using the most basic one, upload an image into it and say, right, extract meaning from that. Bring it back in a structured format. Give me some, something about the setting, the color, product. These are photos of shoes. So I'm really interested in the clothes that people are wearing, and the color, the sort of ambience. Is it formal? Is it casual? And you can ask it to do that, and it will output the a block of code which basically describes the image. And then you think, right, okay, well, if I could build a program that does that at scale, I can, as long as I'm very specific about, these are the values, it's going to be formal or casual. They're the two that I'm going to allow you. As long as you can be specific about that, you could potentially then, build a tool that will go through an archive of images and add fairly significant and useful metadata to all of them, which again, if you're thinking of them building a front-end experience, and you've got a customer on the site who's looking for, I don't know, like wedding shoes, for example, you can suddenly call on all of those images and generate something really engaging. It's another area where, these things aren't just writing code, they can do visual analysis as well in that way.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see where this goes and how many more teams use this DI approach as a de facto part of their day-to-day work, because we've seen a lot in content generation. It's been established in ecom teams. Content ideation, content creation, people using it to whether it's creating like blog post templates which they can then on brand and put into their own phrasing, etc. But it seems definitely more nascent in product data manipulation outside of traditional, I guess, vendors and agencies doing it. Or are you starting to see more client teams actually do more product data work with AI tooling?
I think, like with all AI adoption, it's sporadic. There will be, and this has been the case for the last couple of years, there'll be certain individuals within certain businesses who you can see are really engaged with it and doing things. But very, very few businesses have got like a wide ranging sort of policy around AI and sort of enforcing its adoption in that way. So it's still early days, which is, guess, this is the thing as well. This is all very emergent, and this is, what we talk about today will change in 6 months' time as these models continue to evolve. But yeah, it's in fits and starts. I would suggest the adoption at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's what I see as well. I'm definitely seeing more and more interest, but I'm yet to see it embedded in BAU practices. I think it's tactically involved in some big projects, but it's not on a regular basis. And I think this is where it will evolve to in ecom teams. Is these tools will be used as a regular part of product upload processes. There'll be less bemoaning, we don't have these 4 attributes, and it will be using AI tooling to help plug gaps. But also helping to clean and restructure data that's coming from suppliers that's not particularly lovely for a front end website.
Yeah, I think the enriching existing data, like with the image example I just gave, is a really good use case as well, given the fact that, given the emphasis at the moment on creating structured data and making all websites, e-commerce stores included, more semantically understandable to machine.
Yeah. And actually, that's an interesting one, because I've worked on loads of projects over the years where people have drawn a line in the sand and said, we're not going to fix historical products because we just don't have the time. We're going to import them as they are, but all new products are going to go through in the new data structure, better data, more attributes, enriched. And then over time, the debt drops off as the products get retired. But actually, the speed of which you can do that in focus on your core range, but then go back to older products, it's far easier now to do that at scale.
Yeah, you've reminded me actually of an actual use case we used on a project last year. So we were doing another Shopify upgrade for one of our clients, Albert Lion, and part of the brief was to update the sort of not the brand identity, but the sort of brand voice. And there was a very much redesigned part of the project. And as part of that required them to revisit a load of product photography. Which, across thousands of products was going to be, just reviewing the products was going to be a pretty tedious exercise and a long desk job for somebody. So at the time we were looking at Lovable, which was sort of emergent at the time. And we built one of these one-off applications. So we using Lovable, we built something which synced back all of the product data from the Shopify store, including the images, and then presented everything. It stored all the product data. It allowed the user to filter by product type or whatever, or newness or various other things. So you could slice and dice these thousands of products into manageable chunks. It then presented a UI where you could see the first 4 images, you could click on it, you could see the rest of the images, and then you could very quickly tick a few boxes and say, right, that needs reshooting. It's the pack shot, it's the lifestyle shot, etc. that needs reshooting. Save that and then download that as a CSV that someone can put into a spreadsheet, and all of a sudden you've got a list of all the products that need reshooting. And an afternoon spent building a one-off tool like that probably saved several days of somebody wading through lots of imagery.
Yeah, nice example. And product and imagery generally, image audits are always fun. Well, that's I'm going to stop there because we could just go down rabbit holes and all these sub use cases. I guess for anyone listening who's got strong thoughts on this or wants to chat about a particular challenge or issue they've got and how you would approach it, how do they reach out?
Just on LinkedIn at Chris Marshall, OnState. My email address, chris@onstate.co.uk. I don't think I'm opening myself up to any more spam by revealing that. I think that's 15 years. That's a matter of public record.
There's now 400 AI app developers who are now sending you their biz dev credentials for buying their tools, mate. That's what's going to happen.
I'm more than happy. I really enjoy talking about this and listening and understanding what other people are doing. So, if anyone's got any kind of real world use cases, then please.
Cool. And look, thanks everyone listening as always. Chris's contact details are on the landing page. And do connect with him on LinkedIn. He shares lots of really interesting posts about explorations and joys and trials of working with this tech. So it's well worth connecting and reading that content. And do keep your ears peeled for our next episode. Take care, everyone.
You're listening to the Inside Commerce podcast hosted by experienced consultants James Gerd and Paul Rogers. Inside Commerce is your fast track to digital knowledge, featuring interviews with leading e-commerce retailers, industry thought leaders, and the C-suite of key tech companies to explore the latest in digital strategy, customer experience, and tech. Discover what the latest trends really mean and get practical advice based on experience to help fine-tune your e-com strategy and tech stack. Follow us on LinkedIn and reach out to James or Paul if you'd like to discuss an e-commerce project. We hope you enjoy the latest episode.